Thank Hashem, we're able to learn. And this class of our learning should be a panacea, should have the base of English immediately. We're on Daf Lamed Hey. Lamed Hey Amid Base. Okay, it's basically it's a new parak. So what's happening here is that Chalitza or Yibum was performed, and then they found out that it wasn't necessary because they realized that she's pregnant, or maybe one of the other wives was pregnant. So what happens then? Well, if the child survives, so then we said, one second, let me adjust this. Then that chalitza was nothing, and she's permitted to the one that did chalitza is permitted to a kayan because there was no chalitza. And if the child doesn't survive, then chalitza is necessary. Okay, and that chalitza wasn't necessary chalitza. Now the question was like this: it's machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. If she's pregnant and chalitza was performed, do we say that she needs to do chalitza again? Or do we say that chalitza was satisfactory? So Rish Lakish says that you need to do chalitza again. And Rabbi Yochanan said no. The chalitza that was done while she was pregnant is satisfactory because we find out later that the child didn't survive, was not viable. So the chalitza was a real chalitza. Okay, so it's a machlekes. What happens in that scenario? So we had some questions from Rish Lakish to Rabbi Yochanan, question from Rabbi Yochanan to Rish Lakish. Now we do Eisvei. It's 7 lines from the wide lines. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan to Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that chalitza does not need to be performed again, since it was performed, since the truth is now known that chalitza was a good chalitza because the child didn't survive. So it says, Ein avlad shel kayama, yikayim. If Yibum was performed. If Yibum was performed and the child doesn't survive, so the Yibum was a satisfactory Yibum. Yikayim. He continues with this wife, with the Yevama. It says, Bishlei Melididi. If you want us to learn according to me, that everything was correct because afterwards we found out that the child wasn't viable. That's why he's allowed to remain with his sister-in-law, which is the Yevama, because everything is correct. The brother died without any children, and he performed Yibam. But according to Rish Lakish, that you say that this is nothing. And the Yibam is nothing. It's not considered Yibam because she was pregnant at that time, even though later on we find out that it was accurate. Why does it say Yikayim? Yachser v'yival v'yikayim ibayile. He has to do Yibam again, according to you. So Rish Lakish responds, my Yikayim. You know what it means that he can continue with this wife? Yachser v'yival v'yikayim. That's exactly what it means. It means that he does Yibam again. The Leisagi, you have to add in the words, Balavachi. Because it wouldn't be satisfactory just to do a get. In other words, in this situation where he is right now, he did a Yibam that wasn't satisfactory on the Yevama. And what would he do if he wanted to divorce her? He would have to do Chalitza, because the Yibam wasn't satisfactory. If the Yibam was satisfactory, then he would just have to do a get. So he has to do Yibam again, then he could do a get, or he could just do Chalitza. Yeah. Rashi says Chalitza wouldn't work. Why wouldn't Chalitza work? Because he already lived with her. So you really have no option. The only option is to do Yibam again and then to do a get. Okay, Ikad Amri, there are those that say this question exactly the opposite. It's really not Rabbi Yochanan asking Reish Lakish. Why does it say Yekayim? It's Reish Lakish asking Rabbi Yochanan. It says, it goes like this. Eisvei Reish Lakish le Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asks Rabbi Yochanan, Ein Avlad Shel Kayama Yekayim, that if the child doesn't survive, then he can keep this wife. According to me, I understand that everything that was done is nothing. So therefore, it says that he can keep this wife. What does that mean? That means that he does Yibam again. And he can't just do a get. He has to do Yibam again. And then if he wants, he can do a get. But according to you, that you don't have to do anything, because the Yibam that you performed while she was pregnant is satisfactory. Ratza Yotzi, Ratza Yekayim Ibayilei. You don't have to be Mekayim. If he wants, he could divorce her right now with the get, according to Rabbi Yochanan. That's Rish Lakish's question on Rabbi Yochanan. Why does it say Yekayim? That according to Rish Lakish, Yekayim means that he has to have relations again for the Yibam to be effective. So why does it say that he has to do that? He doesn't have to do that. The Yibam that he did before was already effective. Rabbi Yochanan responds the way he responded before. He says, Enachanami, you're right. However, I did the Tani Reisha Yaitzi, Tani Nami Seifa Yekayim. Because he said at the beginning that he has to divorce her, over here it says he doesn't have to divorce her. Okay, but it doesn't mean that he can't divorce her now as well immediately. He can. It's not that he has to. Okay. Meisvei. Now the Gemara has a question, but it's not from the Mishnah, it's from a Brisa. And it's a question on Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish is asking Rabbi Yochanan. Again, it's a machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. If Yibam or Chalitza is performed when the widow is pregnant, and then we find out that the child doesn't survive, was that considered a Chalitza or a Yibam? So Rabbi Yochanan says that it was. Reish Lakish says that it's not. So the question goes like this on Rabbi Yochanan. Hakayna says Yevimta v'nimtza smu beres. Someone does Yibam. Turns out that it may not have been necessary because she's pregnant. It's more than not necessary. It's a prohibition. It's a sister-in-law, and there was no mitzvah of Yibam. However, Harizu leitinasi tzarasa. Her co-wife cannot go ahead and get married to anyone. Now, really, we could look at it like this. Why not? If the child is viable, the child survives, then what's the problem? The husband didn't pass away without children. There's children. If the child doesn't survive, then according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's all good anyway. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, Yibam was performed, and that Yibam is good. So the Gemara said, the Brisa continues, says, why can the co-wife not get married to anyone? Really, she should be allowed to. It says, Shema Yehi Vlad ben Kayama. Maybe the child is viable. It says, Adarabba, what are you telling me? Yavi Vlad ben Kayama miftir tzarasa. If the child is viable, then there's no need for Yibam anyway. Yeah, that's a problem with the Brisa. So it adjusts the whole thing. It says maybe the child wasn't viable. Child wasn't viable, then Yibam is required. Well, so what? Yibam was performed. So it's a question Rish Lakish has in Rabbi Yochanan. If you say, according to you, Rabbi Yochanan, that the Yibam that was performed, the relations that they had when she was pregnant, not knowing that she's pregnant, is acceptable. Why can the co-wife not get married? According to Rabbi Yochanan, no, it's all good. According to Rabbi Yochanan, It's also everything is oh well. It's a very special wine. Very nice. Oh wow. And the mamey. Okay. Okay. So Rish Lakish has a question on Rabbi Yochanan. Why is the co-wife not allowed to get married? Amar Abaya, so Abaya comes in and adjusts what's going on over here. He switches the machlekes around. Amar Abaya, bebiya kuli alma leipligid leipacha. Everyone holds that if Yibum was performed, it's not valid while she's pregnant. Tipligi bechalitza. The whole machlekes was only by chalitza. Okay, we resolved the whole brisa. How does this help? Because because we found out what happened was the husband passed away, Reuven passed away. So Shimon goes and does Yibam on Leah. Okay, now there's a co-wife to Leah, there's Sarah. So Shimon does Yibam on Leah, finds out that Leah's pregnant. So he wasn't supposed to be with her. So what happens now? Sarah wants to get married. She has someone else she wants to marry. She's a widow. She wants to marry someone else. So we said, what's the problem? If the child is viable, so Sarah's free to go. Her husband, Reuven, passed away with children. She doesn't need anything. If we say the child is not viable, according to Rabbi Yochanan, so what? Yibam was performed. And she's free to go. So comes along Abaya and says that Yibam is nothing. Even according to Rabbi Yochanan, that said chalitza would work, he holds that Yibam won't work. Okay, this is an adjustment in the words of Rabbi Yochanan. We didn't say that before. We said before that Rabbi Yochanan holds that what we find out later retroactively goes back and helps us. So now Abaya explains the machlekes. Rabbi Yochanan savar chalitza smu beresh shmei chalitza. The chalitza of a pregnant woman would actually work. But bias muberes leish may be a Rish Lakish savar bias muberes leish may be a chalitza muberes leish may chalitza. That's the machlekes. Rabbi Yochanan holds that Yibam doesn't work, and Rish Lakish holds Yibam or chalitza doesn't work while she's pregnant. The only thing that would work according to Rabbi Yochanan would be chalitza. Amalei Rava. Rava says to Abaya, he says, "What are you talking about? You can't get away with saying that. To resolve a brisa, you're gonna make a statement like that." He says, "Manafshach." It doesn't. You can't adjust it like that. The opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. If you want to say that a yibum that's performed, the relations that with the pregnant wife is acceptable, then chalitza muberes shmei chalitza. Then we can also accept the chalitza. BBS muberes leish may be, and if yibum is not acceptable, is not satisfactory at that moment, so chalitza muberes nami leish may chalitza. So the chalitza is also not satisfactory. Why not? The kolay yibum ayla chalitza, b'chol sheina yibum ayla chalitza. Because anything that yibum doesn't work, chalitza doesn't work. And you're telling me yibum doesn't work. So then the chalitza shouldn't work either. Okay. So what happens now is classic Elam Rava. Rather, Rava comes in and gives his own statement. We're on top of Lamed Vav, on top of 36. Hachi Kamar. This is what it means. Hakainis Yevimtai. Someone does Yibam. It's relations with his Yivama. Benimtis Milberes. He finds out that she was pregnant. So that was not a good idea. Hariza like Tinasi Tsarasa. The co-wife is still not allowed to get married. Why? Shemi Vlad ben Kayama. Maybe the child will survive. Remember before we adjusted it, we said, if the child will survive, then she's free to go. The husband passed away with children. We said, so we adjusted it. We said, okay, what we really meant to say was maybe the child won't survive. We corrected the brisa in order to make it fit with our understanding. Rava says no. Rava says our original understanding was correct. If the child will survive, that's a problem. Why is that a problem? Well, Rish Lakish is going to tell us that the child only exempts her after he's born, not when the child is conceived. Right now, the child is only conceived. That's not enough. So usually, I have proofs for this also, different places in the Gemara, but usually, fatherhood starts from conception and motherhood starts from birth. That's usually how it's put. Yeah. Rashi and Chumash actually says this. Why Yaakov is considered the firstborn to Yitzchak. He said, if you have a tube and the seed that goes in first is going to come out second. That's why Yaakov was born second. That's because fatherhood starts from conception. Motherhood starts from birth. Yeah. Over here, what we're saying is that whatever you want to tell me about fatherhood and motherhood, oh, that's all philosophy. What's really happening is that in order for the wife to be able to get remarried, the child has to actually be born. That's only then is it considered that the child passed away with children. The father passed away with children. If the father passed away with children, then the widows are free to get remarried. And in this case, the father passed away and the mother's only pregnant. So the co-wife, not the one that Yibam was performed on, the co-wife is still not free to get remarried until the child is born. So what the way we said it was correct. Shemi Yevlad ben Kayama. Maybe the real heter here is because the child is viable. But for that, you have to wait. And Yibam on a pregnant woman is not considered Yibam. Sounds like Rish Lakish. In the chalitza is also nothing. He didn't do chalitza. But even if he would have, it would have been nothing. And the child would only exempt once he's born. Very clear, a question on Rabbi Yochanan. It's all following Rish Lakish, this brisa. That what's done during the pregnancy is nothing. Tani Kavasei de Rava will bring a support for Rava. Yeah. Rashi points out that we can resolve Rabbi Yochanan. It's not a problem on Rabbi Yochanan. Because when does Rabbi Yochanan say that that what's done during pregnancy is acceptable? That's only if afterwards we find out that the child didn't survive. But over here, the child, we're concerned that the child will survive. So maybe the child will survive. So that's why l'chatchila the second wife can't get married. If we would find out later, then maybe we'll go back and we'll tell it. But we're not doing that. We're not going back. We're not going to the future and back. No, it's not back to it's future and back. Yeah. So Tani Kavasei de Rava. We have a riot that Rava's reading of the brisa is correct. It says like this: we have another brisa that supports Rava's reading. If someone does yibam, turns out she was pregnant. The co-wife cannot get married. Maybe the child will survive. It's exactly the way Rava read it. That's the case. Then Yibam and Chalitza don't exempt her. Only the birth will exempt her. And that doesn't work until he's born. Taima, what's the reason? Why are you telling me that this is an issue? Because you said, what's your problem? maybe the child will survive. But let's take it the other way. Let's say the child doesn't survive. But if the child doesn't survive, now we don't know what's going to happen. But miftar tsarasa, if that would happen, then she would be exempt. It's exactly the opposite. What we thought was a raya to Rish Lakish, a proof to Rish Lakish, turns out is a proof to Rabbi Yochanan. Leimatevitiv to Rish Lakish. This is a very strong question on Rish Lakish. It's exactly the opposite of what we thought. Turns out that what's the whole reason why the co-wife cannot get remarried is because maybe the child will survive. That would mean that if the child doesn't survive, then she would be allowed to get remarried. Only Rabbi Yochanan would say that Yibam is going to work while she's pregnant. Rish Lakish would say it doesn't work. Even Abaye and Rabbi Yochanan would say it doesn't work. But there's a raya to Rava that Yibam, according to Rabbi Yochanan, works while she's pregnant if the child later on doesn't survive. Okay, Amalach Rish Lakish would respond to you. When it says Amalach, it means that he's not actually speaking. It means he would have, you have a question on him, this is what he could have said. Achik Tani, we'll read it like this. If someone does Yibam on the widow, turns out that she was actually pregnant. The co-wife is not allowed to go ahead and get married. Maybe the child will not survive. That's the way we read it before. Rish Lakish would respond that the way Rava read the Brisa is not correct. We'll go back to the way it was read before when we tried to amend it. Because chalitza and yibam during pregnancy doesn't help, even if the child doesn't survive. Well, let's just say that the child will survive because majority of children survive. This does not affect all of that. This theory is that what child infant mortality and all of this doesn't affect that. We're just talking about that most pregnancies make it to birth. Now, what happens to the child from then to age 8 or whatever they discussed in all of those things? What was going on, years ago? It's all speculation. But
haven't been vaccinated. There's no chance.
So we're talking about that the Gemara has an assumption that majority of pregnancies make it to birth and the child is viable. So why are you creating doubts over here, telling me that maybe the child won't survive? Majority do survive, and so let's just say that she's permitted to get married. We say that's a nice thought, but even if the child will survive, which majority do, but it only works after he's born.
Right.
Okay, that's how Rish Lakish would resolve the question on him from the Brisa. He would say that maybe the child won't survive, and that's why the yibam that was performed is nothing. Okay. As opposed to the way Rabbi Yochanan reads the Brisa, which is maybe the child will survive, and then the yibam that was performed is nothing. But if the child doesn't survive, then the yibam is effective. That's Rabbi Yochanan's view. Okay.
Rabbi, if the whole point is to procreate and to leave a seed of the brother, if she's pregnant, why isn't the halacha just to wait and see what happens? What's the hurry?
My question.
Yitzi says that was his question.
He has a good question. I love his question.
The halacha is to wait. We're talking about if they didn't. If they didn't wait, what happens now? So there was yibum that was performed. Can the co-wife now go and get married? And we were thinking like mimanavshach. either the child's viable or it's not viable. If it's
The
viable,
point is that if she's pregnant and he does yibum, it's almost like, what's the
it's a
sense?
sister-in-law.
The-
Right, it's a
like,
sister-in-law. It's a prohibition.
yeah,
Right. But on the that's true.
because whatever he does with her, if he lives with her, whatever he does with her, it's not l'shem pruvu, because she's already pregnant.
Oh,
Whatever he
that's
does
what
at
you're
that point,
saying.
that's
Oh,
yeah, it's just
huh.
like, what's the whole?
Uh-huh. If the idea was to establish the
Procreate.
child, right?
The seed of the brother.
Brother. Yeah. Yeah. We could complicate it to resolve your question. We'd say that there was several wives. One of them was pregnant. One of them Yibum was performed on. And we're asking if that Yibum is valid.
You mean if it was done on one that was not pregnant, even though there is a wife that was pregnant?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a whole.
Yeah. So that would resolve your question. I don't think halachically that's necessary. I mean, in the logic, in the rationale of this, then yeah, we would give that case. But the halachic example is not necessary, because even though the yibum was instituted for a certain reason, but the halacha of yibum is that once they have relations, that's considered the marriage. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rabbi Lazar. See where we're holding in the middle, right in the middle of Lamed Vav. Rabbi Lazar says, Rish Lakish is such a big chiddush. Is it possible that there's no brisa that actually says what Rish Lakish says? Nafak, dak, va'ashkach. Now, just to put this into historical context, you remember Rabbi Yochanan was a chavrisa with Rish Lakish. It was his brother-in-law also. Then there was this conflict, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Remember that regarding a knife. Anyway, Rish Lakish passed away. Rabbi Yochanan was left without his brother-in-law, without a chavrusa. So Rabbi Lazar comes in and takes over and studies with Rabbi Yochanan. Now, what Rabbi Lazar does is everything that Rabbi Yochanan says, he always brings him a support from a brisa. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't need your supports. I know that I'm right. Rish Lakish used to always challenge me, and when he challenged me, we would then come to the bottom of the, to the core of the issue, and we'd be able to answer questions and figure out what's the main thing here. So comes along, yeah, it's a brother-in-law. Now comes along, we have a machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Comes along Rabbi Lazar and says, I can find the support in a brisa for Rish Lakish. He's going to be the one that's going to find that support. The Tanan. Sounds like it's a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah. A woman that her husband and her co-wife went on a trip. Left her back at home. Not to watch the children, because there are no children. Just left her at home. It doesn't sound nice. So maybe they were taking turns. Let's put it like that. Okay. They come and they tell her husband passed away. She can't get married. Her husband has a brother there. Can't do yibam either. Why not? Maybe the co-wife is pregnant. He just passed away. Okay. Now the Gemara, the Rebbe Lazar is going to explain what's happening. I understand why you can't do Yibam. It's a huge problem. If there's a child, then Yibam cannot be performed because maybe the child is viable, and that's a sister-in-law. But just do chalitza. What's the big deal? There's no prohibition in that. Take the shoe, in the spit, and that's fine. So bishlai metachletz b'teich tes b'tinasi b'teich tes loy. If you want to tell me that you want to do the chalitza within 9 months, and then she's going to get married within 9 months, hainu safek. That's a question. Why? Safek is maybe there's a child there, maybe there isn't. If there's a child, then you have to wait for the child to be born. It doesn't help. And if there's no child, then okay, but you don't know that. Why don't you just do chalitza now, and she'll get married on the 9th month, that day, right after the 9th month, she'll get immediately married. Gemara says, so 1 second. This would be a good proof to Rish Lakish that chalitza doesn't help while she's pregnant. Gemara says, the Brisa, the Mishnah didn't even say that you can get married in the Yibam after 9 months. What was the wording of the Mishnah? It said you can't do chalitza, you can't do Yibam. I'm sorry, can't get married or do Yibam until you find out. Didn't even say 9 months. It says until you find out. That means even after the 9 months passed, you still can't. According to you, that you're telling me you should be able to do chalitza and then get married immediately after the 9 months. I have a bigger question. Even after the 9 months, it sounds like there's a problem. Don't use that as a support. The Abaya Baraba, it's probably Baravin, Baravchinna Baravin, Damri Tarvayu, Shemi Vlad ben Kayam Matricha Cruz Lakahuna. You know what's going to happen over here? Let's say you do chalitza. Okay, chalitza should work, according to Rabbi Yochanan. It's not a support to Rish Lakish, but chalitza would work. So why don't you allow it? The answer is because, let's say chalitza wasn't necessary because we find out that the wife that went on the trip was actually pregnant. Now, the wife back at home wants to marry a kohen. Problem is, chalitza was performed. You just did chalitza, which wasn't necessary. So you'll say, okay, she can marry a kohen. The problem was at the chalitza, they had everyone there. We're going to have to go and put an ad in the newspaper saying that the chalitza that was performed was not necessary. And the reason why she's now marrying, Mr. Cohen is because that chalitza wasn't necessary. So Gemara says, sorry?
Shouldn't there be 2 steps? First, wait 3 months and see if they're pregnant. And if they're pregnant, then wait 9 months to see if it's a viable baby.
Yeah, very good.
Very good, excellent.
So I was ignoring that. Rashi goes through that. Rashi actually has a different girsa. If you notice in Rashi, that Rashi goes through this and then he rejects this girsa. Yeah, we're skipping that. What would happen? You wait 3 months to see if she's pregnant. If she's not pregnant, then chalitza should work according to Rabbi Yochanan, and you're not suggesting that. So the fact that you're not suggesting that is a support to Rish Lakish. Yeah, but then so even if you take that approach, but then the Gemara asks back. So why didn't you even suggest after 9 months? Why do you have to tell me? I mean, the question that the Gemara asks back is, why do you tell me Ad Sheteda? What is it? Ad Sheteda Shema Muberes Yitzarasa. You want to say that's the 3 months itself? Yeah. Yeah, the issue with that is that once you find out that she's pregnant, then what do? You still don't know if it's viable. So you're back in the same with the same question if she's pregnant, because you would still have to wait till the 9 months. Now that the Gemara said, okay, so you wait the 9 months, then what happens? So the Gemara says it's no proof from here, because what we're talking about in this case is that she wants to marry a kohen, and we're going to have to make an announcement. So the Gemara says, so make the announcement. It's a big deal. People will learn an extra halacha, that when you do chalitza, when it wasn't necessary, it's considered nothing, and she can marry a kohen. The Gemara says, not everyone's going to read the paper. Then it's going to see that that's the case. Besides, when they correct things, they always put it on a later page. So the mess ups are on the first page, and the corrections are at the end. So, and people are just going to say that they're allowing a chalutza to marry a kohen, which is problematic. Amalei Abaya says, "Midi like tachleitz like tisyabim ktani." Does it say that you can't do chalitza? Abaya says you made assumptions based on this Mishnah that it never even said. It never said not to do chalitza. It says leitinase v'leitisyabim ktani, v'lei chalitza. Don't do yibam, and don't get married without chalitza. It just said don't do yibam and don't get married. It didn't say not to do chalitza. Obviously, what it means is aval I chalitzla hachinami desharia. It's not a raya to Rish Lakish. Rabbi Elazar was all like, how could it be? Rish Lakish has this interesting chiddush, and there's no Mishnah that supports it. There has to be a support to Rish Lakish. Turns out that it's actually a support to Rabbi Yochanan, because it doesn't say that you can't do chalitza even during the 9 months. You could do chalitza during the 9 months. It just says don't get married. What it means is don't get married without chalitza. Tani Kava said the Rish Lakish. We have another brisa that supports Rish Lakish. It says achilitz l'muberes v'hipila. If someone did chalitza to a pregnant woman, that was a mistake. But then she gave birth. So, I'm sorry, then she had a miscarriage. Then it's not a mistake. So, tzricha chalitza menachem. You have to do chalitza again. Can't get a bigger raya than that to Rish Lakish. You do chalitza again. Rish Lakish is right. Amar Rava Hilchas Kavaseder Rish Lakish Bahani class. Rava says the halacha is like Rish Lakish in the following 3 cases. Yeah, usually if there's a machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. Rava says except for 3 cases. Chada Hada Amran. One of them is this: that if chalitza was performed on a pregnant woman by mistake, you have to do chalitza again, even if the child didn't survive and it was actually turned out that it was correct. But you have to do chalitza again. It was considered like nothing. Idach, another halacha that we're going to pass on like Rish Lakish goes like this: Titanan hamachalik nechasav al piv. Yitzi, this is for you. If someone divides up his property, his possessions, to his children, riba lechad amiyat lechad. He gives one more than the other one. Gives one less. And he says the oldest son gets the same amount as everyone else. Dvarav kayamin. It's effective. It's good. Why is it good? Because he gave it as a gift. He didn't do it as an inheritance. So he divided it while he was still alive. What do they call this? Is there a word for this? Is this the living will or something? What is it? Just a gift. Okay. Dvarav kayamin. V'mamar mishum Yerusha. If he uses the word inheritance in there, layam maklum, then that's a problem. Why? Why is that a problem? Because he's making a condition. He's doing something that's against the Torah. He can't do that. It's masna mashikasa b'Torah. It's you're saying something. The Torah says clearly how the inheritance should go, and you're saying differently, it doesn't work. We don't accept anything that you say. Kasav, bein b'tchila, bein b'seif, bein b'emtzim, mishum matana dvarav kayamin. If he writes like this, if he says, this field should be given as an inheritance, or this inheritance should be given, he uses the word gift or given, so then it's going to be effective. Wherever he says the word gift in there, that's good. Dvarav kayamin. Now comes along Rish Lakish. We're looking for a statement of Rish Lakish to say the halachos like him. Rish Lakish says, "Am Rish Lakish lo'ilam lekanat sheyemer pleni yoshusad the plainness of plainness of plainness shenasatim lem b'matan v'yoshim." Rish Lakish says it's not enough just that one of them has the word gift in there. Every single one of those inheritors needs the word gift in their inheritance in there, as you can't just say that one of them got a gift. It says that the gift that I gave to all of them as their inheritance. But as long as you use the word gift in all of them, then that's fine. So the halacha follows Rish Lakish that he has to use the word gift in all of them. The third statement of Rish Lakish that Rav is going to paskin like, it says a case of kol nechasav libnai lachar ma'aseh. This is an interesting one. He says that is there a word for this? He gives his child all of his inheritance, but he can only take it after he passes away. He gives it to him from now. Says, but meanwhile, I'm spending the money. I'm living in the apartment. I'm doing everything. I'm driving the car. The father gets to use everything. Maybe he'll use it all up, but the principal is going to the son from now already. It can take it afterwards.
Yeah. Bad idea.
Yes, he says it's a bad idea. Okay, so the father can't sell because he gave the principal to the son. The son can't sell because the father is still using it. Let's say the father did sell. So it's mechur not sheyamasu. It's sold, the rights of it are sold until the father passes away. And someone else can live there and to use it, drive the car, take the fruits of the trees. Machar ben, if the son sold it, then he has to wait for the father to pass away for the sale to be effective. The itmar, and it was stated, Machar ben b'chayav, Mesa ben b'chayav. What happens if the child actually sold it? So you have to wait for the father to pass away for the sale to be effective. But instead of the father passing away, the son passed away. So what happens then? Rabbi Yechanan Amar Leikana Leikeach. Rabbi Yechanan says gets nothing. Purchaser gets nothing. Even after the father passed away. Why? Because what was sold? Only the principal, but not the usage of it. So really what was sold, according to Rabbi Yechanan, was not the main part. According to Rabbi Yechanan, ownership is what you can use, not just another item on a piece of paper, not just rights. Rights without any usage is nothing. And Rish Lakish Amar Kana Lekeach, Rish Lakish says no. The Lekeach, the purchaser does get it. Rabbi Yechanan says the purchaser doesn't get anything because the usage of it is like the item itself. And Rish Lakish Amar Kana Lekeach, Rish Lakish says no, he does get it because those are two separate things. There's the actual ownership of it, and then there's the usage of it. Usage of it is not the actual ownership. So the child actually sold what was really the full item. Okay. We say over here that he's going to paskin like Rish Lakish, that it was considered a sale. Ein avlad shel kayama, the Mishnah said that if the child didn't survive and Yibum was performed, so Yibum was a mistake because she was pregnant. But it turns out that it's not so bad because the child didn't survive anyway. But what can he do? It said that he keeps her as a wife. Tana Mishum Rebbe Lazar Amru. Mishum Tana. I was talking to Bryce Mishum Rebbe Lazar Amru. The name of Rebbe Lazar. That's Rebbe Lazar ben Horkness. Yotzi beget. Nevertheless, he has to divorce her. It's a knas. Why? Why is it a knas? What did he do wrong? He did yibum when it wasn't allowed. We found out that he was right. And he says, see, I told you. And we say, yeah, but you weren't supposed to do that. So he has to get divorced. Amar Rava, Reb Meir of Rabbi Eliezer, Amar Davar Echad. Reb Meir says the same thing as what Rabbi Eliezer says. What does he say? Rabbi Eliezer Hadaman. Rabbi Eliezer, we just got that if he gets if he did yibum at the wrong time, even though it turned out that he was correct, but we forced them to get divorced. What does Reb Meir say? Reb Meir says, Tanya, lo yisadamu beres chaver menekes chaver. If a man passes away, his wife should not get married for if she was pregnant or if she was nursing, she should not get married for 2 years because the new husband could make her pregnant and it's going to affect the milk. She's supposed to wait 2 years if she's pregnant or nursing. Vim nasa, but let's say they do get married. So yaitzi, they should separate. Yaitzi means more than that. Sounds like divorce. He's never allowed to marry her again.
Wow.
The Chum say, we're not so strict on it. We just say that they separate or divorce, but however, after 2 years, they can get remarried. He was supposed to wait 2 years, so wait 2 years. It's fine. Amalei Abaya. So what happened over here was Rava says, Reb Meir and Rebbe Eliezer say the same thing. If someone gets married when they weren't supposed to, they have to get divorced. They can never come back together. That's Reb Meir's view. Rabbi Eliezer said it regarding yibum. Reb Meir said it regarding marriage within a pregnancy, or nursing. The same statement that they have to separate forever. Amalei Abaya says, Mimai. How do you know that they really hold of each other? Maybe Rebbe Eliezer would agree with the Rabbanan that argue on Reb Meir, and maybe Reb Meir would agree with the opinions that argue on Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer only said over here that they have to get divorced. They did yibum when they weren't allowed. Because he just married his sister-in-law. That's prohibited according to the Torah. Unless, of course, there would be no child there. But it turns out that there was a child. Turns out not there was a child. Turns out there still wasn't a child, but she was pregnant at the time when they did yibum. So for that's a very serious thing. So we make them separate. Aval Hassam, Derabanan. But over there, marrying a nursing widow, a widow that's nursing her child for the first 2 years, is only a rabbinic law. Kirabanan spirale. He would hold like the rabbis that you separate for the 2 years and then you get remarried. It's not so serious. Inami, I could tell you the opposite. Adkan like Reb Meir Hassam. When does Reb Meir say that they have to get separated forever? They have to get divorced. There's some rabbinic laws that are even stricter than biblical laws. Why? Because we're afraid that you're going to take it leniently. Yeah, it's just rabbinic. The rabbis come along and they say, no, it's going to be very strict. But over here, it's a Torah law. We don't have to be so strict. No one's going to do that. We don't have to put big fines on this. Amar Rava. Rava says, "Al divrei chacham yitzia beget." Divrei chachamim, even according to the sages that say that they can get remarried after the 2 years, but the divorce is a real divorce. It's not just a separation. Amar Mar Zutra dekanami dektani yotzi v'lektani yafresh. Shema mina. Mar Zutra says, "I'll prove it to you." The wording of the sages would say that you send her out. It doesn't say separate. That's a good proof. Okay. Should we leave it here? Should we go to the next? I'm going to rush through it if I go through the next piece. Let's leave it here.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day. Shkoyach.
Good day.
Thank you.
Again, we'll learn on Shabbos and Yom Tov at 9 a.m. Is that right? Okay. Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Jonathan, where are you? Oh, he left. He went to Baltimore or something. Where is this? Okay.